Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. This is CBC Windsor News. Thanks for watching. Tonight, Windsor's drug consumption site was supposed to open by the end of this month, but it's been delayed. We'll have the latest. Plus, the future of the Detroit-Windsor truck ferry is in jeopardy. The company is asking for help from the government to stay afloat. Alberta has been calling for southwestern Ontario workers to consider moving out west. Well, now ChathamKent is making its own counter-offer. And the debate over Windsor's proposed aggressive panhandling bylaw continues. We'll hear from a legal expert who opposes the move. Let's begin tonight with more on Windsor's first safe drug consumption site. It was expected to open in March, but as the month comes to an end, the Safe Point site remains idle. Dale Molnar now on the delay and what has advocates worried.
The Safe Point site at 101 Wyandotte Street East is good to go, almost. On March 8th, it passed Health Canada's inspection. The holdup? The health unit has still not received final approval from Health Canada to open the doors.
Health unit staff has been following up with Health Canada to get an update, but on their end, they're very busy, and so the communication back is that it's certainly being reviewed, and it's going to be hopefully in the next week or two.
Councillor Fabio Costante is the health unit's board chair. He says once it gets Health Canada's okay, it will take about a week to get the site open. Advocates of the site are glad it passed inspection, but are concerned delays will cost lives.
I think the sooner the better. It's better than a year from now, which would have been the minimum if Councillor Agostino's motion was put forward a few months ago and passed. So I think the sooner the better is really the bottom line.
The co-director of the Downtown Windsor Community Collaborative feels the same way.
Certainly, the sooner the better that it can be open. We're losing one or two folks a week. Why does that have to happen? We have the capacity to providing one solution towards that. Well, I think over the last few years, neighbors have been frustrated in not having enough tools, in a sense, to respond to concerns or people using in our neighborhoods. And we had one option was call the police. And now we have another option of really encouraging folks that we care about or concerned about and redirecting them down to the safe consumption site.
Fabio Costante says the renovations are substantially done and people are being hired to staff the site.
There's a manager that was recently hired to manage the operation, and others I believe are in the process of being hired or hired in some cases.
CBC News has reached out to Health Canada to find out when the Safe Point injection site could open, but so far they have not given us any information. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
The future of a critical cross-border service is up in the air. The company that operates the Windsor-Detroit truck ferry says it's in financial trouble and in danger of shutting down. What's changed is there are fewer trucks coming across. The crossing is the only way to get oversized and hazardous goods between Windsor and Detroit. And some of those shipments are crucial to big projects like the EV battery plant and the Gordie Howe Bridge. That's according to the ferry company. The Gordie Howe Bridge will allow hazardous goods across once it opens in a few years, but in the meantime, the ferry company is looking for financial help from governments on both sides of the border. It also points out that the ferry serves as a backup to get trucks across if there are problems at the Ambassador Bridge.
It's a private service with a public purpose, and we've been able to do it for 33 years on our own, but since the pandemic and all the change in the traffic, it's no longer possible. So, you look at the Gordie Howe Bridge, it's a multi-billion-dollar investment being made because there's not enough redundancy and resiliency at the border. So do you really want to reduce the only other redundancy to the 94-year-old Ambassador Bridge before the bridge opens? That's the question.
He says he needs $80,000 US a month from both Michigan and the Canadian side to keep the ferry running. Ward also has to decide soon if he wants to renew his lease on the equipment to stay in business. Windsor MP Brian Massey wants to see a solution to keep the ferry going. He's written to the government on the issue. Transport Canada says it's reviewing the letter and will respond in due course. Alberta's aggressive campaign to draw workers to go out west now has some competition from ChathamKent. The municipality is fighting back with its own campaign to lure workers from out west to come here. TJ Deere has the story.
You've probably seen or heard ads like this.
We're focused on economic growth and attracting investment, creating jobs.
A plea from Alberta to get workers to leave other parts of Canada and find employment in Wildrose country. ChathamKent isn't taking the move to poach its people lying down. It's firing back with ads like this on Calgary's airwaves.
ChathamKent, Ontario, a great place to call home. Find out why at yck.ca.
The manager of ChathamKent's ad campaign said the mayor wanted to respond to Alberta's targeted radio ads aimed directly at ChathamKent.
Not being one to be one-upped, Mayor Canniff said, Eric, we got to do something. And what he concocted was to do a friendly response.
ChathamKent worked with local radio station CKXS-FM to create the ads. The station's general manager was honored to provide the voice for one of them.
I'm proud of ChathamKent. I mean, the mayor mentioned to me if I'd considered voicing one of the ads, and I said, absolutely. I love this community. I'd love to promote ChathamKent.
But ChathamKent is up against stiff competition. According to their provincial budget, Alberta is spending $5 million annually on their campaign. The promos will be through a variety of mediums across Ontario and Atlantic Canada.
They're going to see transit ads, billboards, they're going to hear radio ads, they're going to see a number of different mediums that are going to showcase some of Alberta's best kept secrets.
By contrast, ChathamKent is spending only $2,000. Because of this, a marketing expert questions whether Alberta is the best place to look for workers.
Perhaps it might be better spent, advertising effort that is, on potentially more advantageous audiences such as those in GTA.
Mayor Darren Canniff says the GTA is where most newcomers to ChathamKent have come from. Even so, Labadie says they chose to start in Alberta to create a dialogue between both jurisdictions. He said the ads will be broadcast on Calgary's most popular radio station for 2 weeks. TJ Deere, CBC News, Windsor.
More push today for a deeper look at what many say is Canada's broken sports system. Windsor West MP Brian Massey tabled a petition in the House of Commons today. He's calling on the Liberal government to initiate an independent public inquiry into widespread abuse at every level of Canadian sport. The petition was signed by more than 700 Canadians from every province and territory. It was initiated by retired University of Windsor sport management professor Victoria Parashak.
From parents, saying, I'm watching my child, who's been damaged, and it's breaking us, it's impacting on all of us. And so I really like that Brian made that point, that this is something that is relevant to our community. And we made sure the petition supporters were all from this community. But this is a movement right across Canada that has been going on by victims and, over 100 professors in this group that I'm in, Scholars Against Abuse in Canadian Sports. So, there are lots of, we made sure we got signatures from every province and territory on this petition. We had we had 709 signatures by the month's end. But, it just shows you, it matters to us here, and we're reflective of the whole country's situation.
The issue of panhandling continues to be a subject of debate at Windsor City Hall. During a committee meeting this week, members recommended a proposed aggressive panhandling bill be approved by council, while at the same time asking for other options to be considered. Here's what some councillors had to say.
This is something that we have to deal with, and I'm not 100% sure that I want to go the bylaw route, but what I do want to go is I want this discussion to come to City Council and be a wholesome discussion.
I think this is an absolutely atrocious way for us to attempt to address a very serious problem in our downtown core. And in fact, I agree with what I heard from our delegates earlier today, that not only will this make matters not have any effective impact in terms of addressing the issues that are that the motion seeks to address, or the issue seeks to address, but it'll in fact make things worse than they already are.
Mackenzie says there are dedicated resources handling some of these concerns already, and he says this is the wrong way to deal with this issue, calling it a sad moment on council and promising to fight this further. The proposal was first initiated by Councillor Fred Francis, who was not sitting on this committee. He's concerned about dangerous interactions between panhandlers and pedestrians. The motion passed 3-5 and will now go on to council for further discussion. One legal expert who spoke at that meeting says you can't police people out of poverty, and says it would be better for council to focus on social supports and housing rather than a bylaw that she feels won't lead to positive results.
I'm really concerned because, this is a continuing problem. This issue has been before council before. We went back in 2014 when a similar proposal was offered on panhandling, and the same kind of concerns are generating that interest. But when we look at what people's financial situation is, if you're on Ontario Works now, every month you're going to receive a maximum of $733. When we look at what the rental cost of just a room in the city of Windsor, it's $1,100. So we know every month there's a shortfall just to pay rent. So obviously people are in financial need, and for some people, the way to address it is by panhandling. And they certainly have the right to seek, financial support, right? There are other options that I think City Council could look at instead of putting in a bylaw where the councillors who are voting for it are saying, we know it's not going to make a difference, we know that people aren't going to pay the fines, and it's not the solution. So if it's not the solution, let's turn the conversation to something more constructive.
And what do you feel like the message is from council to some of these vulnerable communities, given these conversations that keep coming up on council between this and the consumption site and the downtown mission?
Well, I think it's important for council to remember that they are the municipal representatives of all residents of the city of Windsor, not just taxpayers. And I think the health of our community is reflected in the way we treat individuals. And if we're giving a message to some people that they don't matter and that property matters more than those individuals' well-being, I think that's a really unfortunate and risky message to send out to people. Right? Because if we keep seeing issues as, a question of crime being committed against property, instead of recognizing what's motivating some of this crime, we're not going to be able to go ahead as community. And what we're trying to do is reposition Windsor as this, wonderful place to live and to invest. And I think investors are going to look at, how do we treat each other, and what's our quality of our community life in Windsor? And we want that to be a positive image.
To national news now. The federal government has approved an agreement that will allow the merger of telecom giants Rogers and Shaw. The deal, valued at more than $20 billion, will see Shaw's wireless business, Freedom Mobile, sold to Quebec-based Videotron. The arrangement comes 2 years after the merger was proposed and with more than 20 government-imposed conditions.
I have secured a non-precedented and legally enforceable set of commitments from both Rogers and Videotron. And after imposing strict conditions, the licenses from Freedom Mobile will be transferred to Videotron.
Rogers will take over Shaw's media and cable assets, most of which are in Western Canada. And Rogers will be required to create 3,000 jobs in the West. It will also have to spend billions to expand its broadband and wireless networks and offer new, lower-cost plans to consumers for both services. Videotron will be required to become a national carrier and offer plans that are at least 20% cheaper than competitors. It is not allowed to sell the wireless assets to anyone else for at least a decade. Both firms could face significant fines if they fail to comply. Let's turn to big news across the border now. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is scheduled to be arraigned in New York next week. This comes after a grand jury voted to indict him in connection with money paid to an adult film actress amid allegations of an extramarital sexual encounter. The announcement has sparked strong reaction. Chris Reyes has more.
New York City is in full preparation mode with former President Donald Trump expected to be arraigned at this courthouse in downtown Manhattan sometime next week. The full force of the NYPD has been put on high alert. You can see increased security behind me, barricades still surrounding the building. Now, as for demonstrators, protesters, it's been quiet where we are, but a small group did gather outside Trump Tower. Now, the reaction coming from both Democrats and the Republicans on this indictment, coming fast and furious, to be expected. Their views are very polarized.
The unprecedented indictment of a former president of the United States for a campaign finance issue is an outrage. And I think it's clear to the overwhelming majority of the American people that this is nothing short of a political prosecution.
The law should apply equally, and you follow the evidence where it leads. The Manhattan grand jury believes it led to Donald Trump and it led to criminal activity. If that's the case, and the Manhattan DA believes they can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, he should be prosecuted like anyone else.
In a statement, Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg had this to say: like any other defendant, Mr. Trump is entitled to challenge these charges in court. What neither Mr. Trump nor Congress may do is interfere with the ordinary course of proceedings in New York State.
He is being persecuted politically. That is clear to many people, not only on the right, but on the left. And we as Americans honestly should be concerned. Today it's Donald Trump. Tomorrow it's going to be a Democrat. The day after that it could be your brother, your son, your daughter.
Speaking to reporters, President Joe Biden was pressed for reaction today.
No, I'm not going to talk about Trump's indictment.
Near Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, loyal supporters remain by his side.
This is going to put him in the office right now. So let him arrest him. He's going to win.
Now, right now, we don't have details of Trump's surrender. It's very likely that his lawyers will challenge the charges that will remain under seal until his arraignment. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
We're going to shift gears now to a record-setting game in the Provincial Junior Hockey League. On Wednesday night, the Lakeshore Canadians faced off against the Wheatley-Olmsted Sharks. The match went into 5 overtimes and lasted a little over 5 hours. So to give you some perspective, a typical game lasts around 2 hours. It's now the longest match in PJHL history, making it both a memorable and painful experience for the players on the ice.
If you walked in our locker room after the 4th period intermission going in the 5th, we had everyone pretty much laying down with our legs up, trying to get the blood flowing. A lot of bananas being eaten, trying to get any liquid we can in us, Powerades, Gatorades, waters, and anything that we can kind of drink and fuel up. A lot of guys were sore. You know, I've never been a part of anything like that. It was honestly the most grueling, I don't want to say worst experience, but it was worse than any bag skater, any physical endurance we had to do. I think at one point, everyone was taking like 10 to 15 second shifts. Guys were falling all over the place. It was hard. It wasn't easy, that's for sure.
And we should mention the Canadians won that game. And meanwhile, here in Windsor, the Spits lost their hockey game last night. That was the first in the playoff games against the Kitchener Rangers. But that was just game 1 in a best of 7. So there's still very much in it to win it. A live look outside there right now. We had plenty of rain today and more is on the way. Colette Kennedy will be here after the break with more. Stay with us. Colette Kennedy joins us now for a look at weather. And Colette, we had all that sunshine, but now we got to deal with the flip side of spring, which is rain, of course.
Yeah, rain and thunderstorms as well. So we've got a few things coming our way, and it's associated with a pretty broad system. And because of that, we're going to have a few waves yet to get through before this thing clears us. And boy, oh boy, it is really, really menacing in the States right now over a very big area. So it's the same system, essentially, kind of 2 points of energy, but the same system impacting us, and that will continue to, that at the moment is bringing severe weather, tornadic activity through multiple states. It stretches all the way from the northern plains back to Texas. And at this moment, all of these areas, more than 12 states you see here, in a tornado watch. And if I remove the watch area, all of these tornado warnings. So likely tornadoes there on the ground. So that's the kind of active weather they're seeing. Now, the thunderstorms headed our way, severe in this stature, not likely, but really keeping an eye there because they're just getting started there with some of that active weather this evening. We're just looking at a bit of thunder and lightning that will be embedded with some of the rain coming through. Now, our temperature, 12 degrees, and it's going to be steady or even climbing as we go towards the morning hours with strong southwesterly flow. So those winds gusty. We get into, yes, a little bit of a break where it's more some drizzle, but it becomes more organized here through the overnight, late evening and overnight hours. We get a batch that carries on. I do see a dry slot tomorrow morning. Now, this is 6 a.m. I know the sun won't be up yet, but there's probably going to be an hour or more where we might get that little break in there to enjoy before the front comes through. And then those strong winds turn towards the west and eventually the northwest. It will clear things out, but it will also drop those temperatures off for us too. So very, very different into Sunday. Look at the rainfall, additional rainfall. We're talking about 20, maybe up to 25 millimeters in areas where locally you get a bit more with an embedded thunderstorm. But watch that temperature because tomorrow we hit that high or we stay where we are or a little bit warmer, and then it falls in the afternoon. -4 for Sunday morning start, then Sunday, sunny, dry, 6 degrees. Don't worry, the warmth will be back, so will the rain.
Thanks so much for that, Colette. Have a good weekend.
You as well.
When we come back, we'll tell you about a farm operating in a very unlikely place. Stay with us.
Yay.
Canada's economy grew again in January. Statistics Canada reports gross domestic product rose by 0.5%, reversing a small decline in December. The increase was bigger than economists had expected. 17 of the 20 sectors measured by StatsCan showed growth in January. Accommodations and food services were among the key contributors. They were up by 4% for the month. One of the biggest and busiest cities in the world is home to a large and unique farm. For nearly a decade, it has been producing herbs and ingredients for salads underground. The farm occupies more than a kilometre of tunnels underneath the busy streets of South London. Not only can it deliver its fresh produce to the store or the table in a matter of hours, it's also cultivating environmentally friendly crops that use less power and less fertilizer.
Growing underground is the first farm for zero carbon farms, and what we do here is we sustainably grow fresh produce in former World War II air raid shelters, and the way that we do it is we use renewable energy, we use recirculating water, and we're able to grow the crops 365 days a year with little impact on the environment. Farming and traditional farming has a lot of challenges, not least of all because of climate change, inconsistent weather, supply chain issues. Also, we have the challenge that we're going to have another 2 billion people on the planet by 2050, and we ultimately need to develop more ways of growing more food to feed the world.
So our water usage will go anywhere from 70 to 90% less than a conventional farm. The reason for that is that we recycle a lot of our water.
We don't use soil, so we don't get agricultural runoff. And also because of the incredibly controlled environment, we're 33 meters under the high street, the crops essentially have their perfect growing environment all day long, all year long. And so that means that their yields and their efficiencies and their growing times are as optimized as possible. And that also means that we get incredibly nutritious, very, very tasty crops that have very long shelf life, so you get less food waste because of things like that.
Move over Ronaldo, another soccer player, is now turning heads and heading the ball. She is 33 years old and has been honing her soccer skills at a temple in southern India since she was 4. She has also won rave reviews for her performance on the cricket pitch. But this multi-sport athlete is humble and plays well with others. So far, at least. That is it for CBC Windsor News. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/Windsor. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for watching. Have a great night and a wonderful weekend.